Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another Hannibal reaction video. Today I'm going to be watching, reviewing, and reacting to Season 3, Episode 8 of Hannibal. And this is actually the second time that I'm filming this introduction. Some of you guys who've been watching these videos for a while may remember that a couple of months ago I had an issue where I was filming an episode and more than halfway through the episode my computer crashed and the video was lost. File corrupted, couldn't use. Something similar has happened today. Thankfully, even though it is extremely annoying, thankfully it wasn't the computer this time, it was the software. Still annoying. And thankfully it was only the beginning that ended up being recorded and then not saving. So I'm not going to start over and re-react to the things that I already saw, but the good news is that it was only a short amount of stuff at the beginning. So what I mentioned in my previous intro, one, I got the jaw thing happening again at the moment. My jaw's been popping out a lot over the past few days, so I may have to keep some of the talking to a lower amount than I usually would at the end, and I'm sorry about that, guys, but we'll see what happens. And then I noticed that Red Dragon was mentioned in the title of the episode, so I was really kind of like just psyched and curious and hyped about the idea of Red Dragon, that storyline coming through in the rest of the series and how they were going to do it, because there's only a few episodes left. So that was my discussion in last time I filmed this. And then of course at the beginning of the episode, which was recorded but you guys won't see sadly, we saw Francis Dollarhide. So yes, Red Dragon storyline is happening, and it went through a really cool, interesting kind of montage of the things that he's been doing, kind of putting in place his physicality, the stuff with the teeth, getting his tattoo, all just very interesting stuff. And it's also the actor Richard Armitage, who I quite like as a choice here. I think it's interesting. I'm very, very interested to see how he ends up portraying this character, but so far I'm excited about that idea. And then I also saw that we have a 3-year time jump. So Hannibal has now been imprisoned in the institution, in the mental institution, for 3 years. So this is quite a big amount of time that he's been stuck there, and time that has passed since he, turned himself in order to screw with Will, make himself always available, always where Will know where he is, going against Will's wishes. But so that is where we are, and where everything crashed and where we left off. We are in the institution, and Hannibal and Alana are speaking to each other. So I'm ready to jump into this, keeping my fingers crossed for no more software crashes and no more issues, and that we just have a smooth recording the rest of the way through, no jaw pop-outs, and that we'll just be good to go. Excited to see Red Dragon in action. Alright, so, Episode 8 of Season 3. Here we go. Some of the kitties did not like that noise. Ah, fuck. They were like, what the hell was that?
A classic Neapolitan dessert
Chilton!
with almond milk. Easy on the stomach.
My favorite!
You've served me this before.
One of my favorite desserts. Traditionally made with pig's blood, in this case a local cow.
And when you last made it for me?
The blood was from a cow, only in a derogatory sense.
Chilton is just like... I still love how he was one of the first people...
And chocolate. That's the subtitle of my book. But I promised myself I would never use
other than Will
colons
to accept
in my
it.
titles. Colons lose their novelty when overused.
You will have to write another book.
I am. But not about you. Like overused punctuation.
Was there a
how
flicker?
Hannibal Lecter has waned.
Oh.
What is the subject of your new book, Frederick?
The Tooth Fairy.
But yeah,
I
I
find
still
culture a
love
bit
like those
wondrous.
scenes of him at the dinner party at Hannibal's looking
Easy
around.
to talk.
Like, I will not be eating
Although he
anything.
lacks your love of presentation.
More of a shy boy, this one.
Love to hear your thoughts.
You ever think about giving me a call?
Jack.
No.
You know what it is?
I know it's a 3-year time jump for us, but it's just like such a stark difference from just
Because I didn't want to.
a couple episodes ago of Jack being like,
Jack, I don't.
I gotta save Will from basically what I set him up for. And then just coming back and pulling him right back into it again.
All day.
Like, how many times are you gonna do this to him?
I promise I'll try to make it as easy on him as I can.
Sure, that's gonna work out. And here he does it.
I know what I'm asking. Should have got it, didn't have to.
And it's so, I mean, he makes it so hard to condemn him because at the same time, I mean, there's a serial killer going around massacring entire families in horrific ways. And if Will could stop it, you'd think the logical thing is for him to come in and try and do it. But after the last 2.5 seasons, it's like, no.
How bad is it gonna be if you stay here and read about the next one?
And now he's even got her
And
on his side. Jack.
maybe it would sour this place for you.
Jack.
High noon and all that.
You want me to go?
I'd have the satisfaction that you did the right thing. It kills families.
If I go, I'll be different when I get back.
I won't.
Ma'am, all due respect, you don't have a full picture of what he's talking about.
Dear Will, we have all found a new life, but our old lives hover in the shadows. Soon enough, I fear Jack Crawford will come knocking. I would encourage you as a friend not to step back through the door he holds open.
Oh, that's...
It's dark on the other side, and madness is waiting.
Just like with everything Hannibal says. Like, on the surface, straightforward, that's what you should say as a friend. And he knows, and he's right. But that's the exact opposite of what he wants Will to do and what he's actually hoping to encourage with this. He's even walking different when he's like becoming him.
I cut Mr. Leeds' throat as he lies asleep beside his wife.
I shoot Mrs. Leeds.
The bullet enters to the right of her navel and lodges in her lumbar spine. Mr. Leeds rises, his throat cut, to protect the children.
That was a really cool shot. The blood splatter strings coming up like red dragon wings. Very cool shot. But, oh my god, poor Will.
I was told you were told.
There's something else I can do.
Oh, good. Here it is.
I can wait until I'm driven to it by desperation in the last days before the full moon, or I could do it now. While it might be of some use.
Is there an opinion that you work with?
It's a mindset I need to recover. I have to see Hannibal. Hello, Dr. Lecter.
Oh well.
All right. Well, there was episode 8, and as I mentioned, guys, I'm gonna keep my discussion shorter than I usually like to because of my jaw. It's been definitely acting up throughout the episode, and I don't want to have it completely pop out. Trying to avoid that if I possibly can. But some things that I definitely want to comment on. First, one thing I was thinking of throughout the course of this episode is how curious I am to see how they're going to pull off doing the Red Dragon storyline for a couple of reasons. One, because there's only a few episodes, like a handful of episodes left in the series. And this is like a pretty large storyline. A full book's worth, obviously. It definitely seems like something that could be at least a full season unto itself normally. So I'm curious how they're gonna incorporate that into just so few episodes, especially with like the way that they also tend to adapt things differently. But then in relation to that, I'm curious about how different from the overall Red Dragon storyline from the books, and then of course the previous film representations of it, this is going to be. And I'm particularly curious about this because one thing that this show has always done really well and interestingly, was adapt the source material in such a way that it drew off of it very, like, frequently in really unique ways. So like they would take elements, some of them lifted directly, even lines sometimes, from the source material, but incorporate them into totally different scenarios. Or they'd like make something a complete homage to a character but have it be a completely different character. So with like Miriam Lass in a lot of ways was like Clarice Starling, right? But then of course her storyline went in a completely different direction, but in a lot of ways that's who she was supposed to be very similar to, just as one example. And then things like Hannibal in Italy, obviously a lot of that is represented in the book Hannibal, but it's very, very differently done here on the show than it is there in the book and in the previous film. But this, with Red Dragon, it seems like it's going to be the first time that a large chunk of the series is actually occurring like in the same timeline and following the same prominent storyline as you've seen in the books in these previous movies. So it's going to be interesting to see how fine a line they walk between direct adaptation, because this is like the first time when all these characters are here. You know, like in the Hannibal one, Will is not there at all. But then they had him being there in Italy, and of course they added Bedelia and all that. But then here in Red Dragon, it is Will being brought back by Jack to investigate Dollarhide's killing of these families to try and stop him, and going and seeing and speaking to Hannibal to get his assistance. So this is the most direct kind of adaptation. And I'm curious to see how close they're going to stick to it and how like they're going to modify it in some ways to still make it like interesting for the people that are very familiar with all that source material, but also I guess not like take away from it too much for the people that are huge fans of that. So it's going to be like what they've always done, but I think it would be maybe a little bit more challenging, and I'm super curious to see how they're going to walk that line and how it's going to play out. I'm sure they'll do a good job with it because they've done a great job with all of that sort of thing so far. I have no complaints, but this one just fascinates me the most, especially because for me, I think other than Silence of the Lambs, obviously, Red Dragon is the, I guess, Hannibal Lecter material that probably the most people are the most familiar with because it's been represented more times than anything else. So I'm really curious. One of the big pluses so far for me is they chose Richard Armitage to play Dollarhide, and he seems like an interesting choice because he very much does have the physicality. He's intimidating in that way, but also is a good actor who can kind of portray that sort of self-loathing and uncertainty. And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing how he continues to bring that character to life. So that's one of my big interests with the way the rest of the season goes, is seeing how they adapt that. I also think it's just interesting. Doing Red Dragon puts them in a very different sort of position than they've been previously in the other seasons. Because even in the first season, they did a lot of the going back and forth between kind of like the killer of the week sort of procedural with Will and the FBI hunting them down and getting into their heads and seeing the specific different killer storylines. And then the longer storyline with Hannibal, which then in season 2, it basically mostly just became the longer storyline with Hannibal with a little bit of other stuff thrown in. But this is basically taking that killer of the week sort of thing, but putting it front and center for multiple episodes. And so one of the consequences of that is that one killer that isn't Hannibal becomes like a centerpiece of the storyline for multiple episodes. So that's a totally different scenario too, because now for like the first time in a long time, they're basically adding in another main level character. I mean, obviously not on the level of Hannibal Will, but somebody that's going to be up there in the same level of importance as, say, Jack or Alana. And I mean, I guess you could say that they kind of did that with Mason too, but he was more like in and out of episodes and just kind of tangential to the Hannibal storyline. So I kind of see it as a bit of a different situation. But so I'm interested to see how that dynamic plays out too. And I feel like this episode really showed how they're trying to start that off, because this episode was very like intro Dollarhide focused, even though you didn't really like hear him speaking. You just heard him making like a bunch of grunty noises and weird like that freaked out my cats and things like that, so you're really introduced more to his just like breaking down and then his killer side, but it was very much focused on setting the stage of who he is and showing us him frequently, and then going from that to Hannibal, and then going from that to Will. So instead of, say, starting off with here's Will and here's everything he's been doing in the past 3 years, or here's Hannibal and everything he's been doing in the past 3 years, they started with Dollarhide, and then he's the focus. So that you can see that they're clearly trying to establish how central he's going to be. And that's a pretty big risk for a show to take, like, in the last few episodes, to have another big character enter in and have him be so prominent. So kudos to them for that. And again, very curious to see how it's going to go. Though I am optimistic because they really haven't let me down. So yeah, and then of course just the same sort of themes that we see throughout. Again, you can't really fully blame Jack because yes, he's right. This man is out there massacring families and you have to try to use whatever tools at your disposal to stop him, right? That's what Jack does. That's who he is. But at the same time, it's just like, even just a few episodes ago, you were like in this valley plague of guilt because you knew what you had subjected Will to, and you were so afraid that you were going to lose him to Hannibal, either to just being killed or to going fully Hannibal himself. And that was because you kept pushing him and pushing him and pushing him. And it seemed like Jack had finally reached that sort of realization and was trying to atone for it by saving Will. And then I know that 3 years have passed in the storyline, but for us it's just been like an episode. And he's already right back to saying, all right, well, Will, you gotta come back. And then just kind of saying, all right, yes, go ahead and see Hannibal. Go talk to Hannibal again. And again, I get it, but it's just the level of culpability that Jack has for everything that happens to Will. Ah, sorry guys, but yeah, it's just frustrating. And that's another thing that's super interesting to me. I was in comparing the feeling that I have about that here as opposed to, say, when reading Red Dragon, or say like watching the films about this, is that like in those stories, when Jack comes to try and bring Will in, you're totally on Jack's side. Like you're like, all right, come on, guy. I get that you've had bad experiences at the FBI and with Hannibal Lecter in the past, but people are being killed, and you've got to like take some responsibility and try to help out, right? Hang on a second, guys. I think this might have frozen. All right, I got it. Sorry, I'm panicking about software, but yeah, so you gotta like come in and take responsibility and try to help out, right? And so then you're happy. You're mostly just happy when Will agrees. But here, because we've seen so much, it's the opposite. It's, even though you know that he's doing maybe the right thing, and even Molly agrees and comes on board, which she doesn't in the books in the other movies, so that's interesting too. But even though she comes on board, it's just this feeling of dread when he's going back, and you know it's gonna happen. You know everything that's gonna happen. You know he's gonna go and he's gonna work on this and he's gonna see Hannibal, and it's still this impending sense of dread when it's happening. It's just, I feel so bad for him and so worried. Just constant worry for Will is like the theme of this series, isn't it? But yeah, anyway, so far I think they're doing a very good job, and I'm really excited to see the rest of the way that Red Dragon is portrayed in this series. And of course, I'm sure we'll have much more interesting stuff to see between Hannibal and Will in the rest of the season too. And of course, just always just shout outs to Chilton for brightening up every episode. So, all right, guys, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. I said I wasn't gonna talk much, and then I did anyway. So, but thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you next time. Bye.